Ladies and gents, welcome to the video. I'm GetGoodGuy. This is Battlefield 5, and I just coughed consistently for about 30 seconds before recording this, so that's fun. And and at the minute, or for a while now, the community for Battlefield has been talking about reverting the time to kill from what we have right now to the older, faster time to kill. At least the majority are. Some people are happy with this one. And then this fire has been stoked by DICE letting us know they are working on some more changes to the TTK and weapon balance, etc., which will take us back closer to the original time to kill, but not spot on it. And so today, let's discuss that. We'll talk about the clear differences between the old TTK and the current one, the good aspects, the bad aspects, and how a move back towards the older time to kill could affect the game now, with other key changes already in place. And I will timestamp in the description, in the pinned comment, and on screen, if I remember, where those sections are, so you can skip to the ones you want if you don't want to watch the whole video. Now, the background footage for this video should be kind of nostalgic because I've gone and recorded old footage from old videos I've made for about an hour or so, and I've selected different parts from it of different weapons to show the old time to kill, to show what it used to be like, how quickly people went down, and how the guns actually performed back then. So if the quality of the video looks a bit off, or the brightness and contrast is weird, or anything like that, it's because it's old, re-recorded, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you understand. And the main focus of today's video is being objective. So enjoy the nostalgia, but try to avoid the bias that's always there in the rose-tinted glasses. Because although the majority want to go back to what you're watching, and I did enjoy it, it was still far from perfect. And please let me know your opinion in the comments below. What do you think of the old time to kill and weapon balance, the current time to kill and weapon balance, and what do you hope for from the coming time to kill and weapon balance? So let's kick this off with the key differences that just pop into my head. So obviously, killing people was faster and dying was faster. It generally took less bullets to kill, and the tempo of the game in terms of those 1v1 or small group gunfights was higher, specifically where the gunfights are concerned. But that fast time to kill and other aspects that we will get into did also cause a lot of passive play. And so in some regards, in terms of movement and such like, the tempo was much slower, at least for a section of the player base. Now, in addition to this, another massive difference was there was more recoil. When DICE changed the time to kill and the weapon balance, they also reduced the recoil in the game, to the point of everything kind of being like a laser beam at the minute. And in fact, I've had a lot of people asking me recently why I don't seem to have any recoil on my guns, and some people assuming I'm cheating, as I've covered in a recent video. And to that I just say there really isn't much recoil at the minute regardless of what you do. Yeah, you can improve it with recoil control, obviously, but there's just not much there compared to how it used to be, and certainly compared to a lot of other first-person shooters out there. I can only assume that maybe some people that thought there was something wrong with my gameplay because of a lack of recoil haven't played the game for quite some time. Maybe they got fed up with it or whatever, or just moved on to something else, and so to them, the lack of recoil looks kind of weird, and that is important. That will be a key aspect of what we discuss later on. But for now, let's carry on with the key differences. Another one is there was just better weapon balance back in these times. It wasn't perfect, there was still a meta, of course. Some things were better than other things, and there were definitely problems with it, but there was less of a gap between the truly top weapons of the time and everything else. At the minute, a lot of guns are kinda just irrelevant because a few guns at the very top just do the job better. And by do the job, I mean time to kill, recoil, range ability, ease of use, all that kind of stuff. There are just a few guns that stand out above the other ones to a massive degree. And this is a real shame because some of the guns out there, clearly the intention was to balance them so they had these key skill sets. They were specialized. But at the minute, a lot of the specialized weapons just aren't necessary. Just slap on a fast firing weapon, enjoy the lack of recoil, and beam people wherever they are. And the lack of range damage for a lot of weapons plays into that because there's less threat running around with these fast firing weapons because you're much less likely to die from ranged weapons now than you were before. We'll tack onto this that there wasn't auto-rotation back then in multiplayer, or at least not anything like what we have now. There was no snap lock-on aim assist. That got added fairly recently, around, I think a little before Christmas time it was, as confirmed by a DICE community manager. I don't need more people telling me it's always been in the game. It absolutely was a change. It's been confirmed and tested. The snap lock-on aim assist is really strong now. Absolutely, this wasn't like this previously. And so aiming a weapon took more skill before. And so overall, put this all together, and with the big thing being the faster time to kill, most people thought it was more skillful. Most people, not everyone, but most. The faster time to kill, range damage being in place, more more recoil on the guns, all of that. The skill gap was higher. I think objectively, actually, the skill gap was higher. Not every aspect of it, but on the whole it was. And so obviously things feel very different now. But let's move on to what was specifically good about this older TTK. Well, as covered in the previous section, the majority felt it was more skillful and satisfying. If you haven't seen that section, I really do mean not everyone, just the majority, and it's on the whole not every aspect of it. Because some people do think a longer timed kill is more skillful due to needing sustained aim in the gunfight, and also have the opportunity to return fire in the gunfight without dying so quickly, and I do understand that. That is a solid principle, and in some games it's absolutely the case. And in some regards it can be the case in BF5. But I feel like the devs went way too far with it, and especially at range, the lack of damage available just kind of kills off there being any competition for a kill a lot of the time. And the recoil changes and the addition of the snap lock on aim assist recently are key aspects of this as well. It's just way too easy right now to land damage for basically all players. The skill gap has been eroded. This wasn't a problem in the old TTK / weapon balancing / gun mechanics. That's a lot of words. A lot more came down to target acquisition, controlling your recoil, and putting that enemy on the ground without everything just being done for you. Plus, you couldn't just run around willy-nilly without, I just said willy-nilly, didn't I? These unscripted commentaries have some weird parts in them. But you couldn't just run about without the fear of being taken down from range and just relying upon snap lock on aim assist with a controller, or the fact that recoil is so easy that you can just see if you react faster and laser beam everyone. Like, it's just way too easy right now. And so a key thing is pleasing your player base, the majority of it. And it seems like, as covered, a large majority liked the older way the game was done, the older time to kill. Satisfying them is going to be key, especially if it's your hardcore. A casual player base helps the game to boom and grow, but long term, especially on a game like Battlefield 5 that hasn't really gone very well, keeping your hardcore players happy is so important. The older time to kill and gunplay mechanics did that better. And if you want to be more specific, things like the Sten had a purpose. You don't really see the Sten at all now. Before, it was pretty popular. It was a slower firing SMG, so it got beaten at close range by a fair few things. It was outclassed, but it was consistent. You could hit people at range. That was the trade-off. In fact, it got to the point that people were complaining because they saw the Sten so much and thought it was overpowered. It absolutely wasn't. It just allowed you to hit targets at range consistently with a weapon type that generally isn't very good at that. And therefore, it was weaker at close range for balance. That was actual balance. Now you don't see the Sten because so many guns can hit at all ranges anyway. Like, why use something like the Sten if a lot of guns already shoot like laser beams and fire faster now? It makes it kind of ridiculous to look at the Sten being criticized before, when now that's the weapon balance we've just got. Like, DICE didn't get it right, and that's why so many guns aren't being used. Back then, also semi-autos had a purpose, which they just don't now for similar reasons. Why use something designed for mid to long range fights, pacing your shots and relying upon that reliability, when again, so many guns can just do that now anyway in full auto, due to a lack of recoil. The older way had a lot more guns and weapon types being relevant, having a point. Even if they weren't all balanced, they at least had a purpose, and they weren't so heavily outclassed by just a small amount of guns. I feel like I've made that point 2 or 3 times now. It is so important. Weapon balance was superior, and from a personal standpoint, I really enjoyed that the AGM/42 back then had a higher rate of fire. It's been gimped now. I still think it's an excellent weapon, don't get me wrong. I think it's one of the top tier semi-autos if you've got the right skill set. A lot of people can't utilize it properly, but some people can. I love it personally. But back then, having a faster rate of fire with that 2-shot headshot, but with a relatively small magazine, it became kind of a skill cannon almost. Now it still is one, but to a lesser degree, and it's less unique as well, because it doesn't have that different fire rate. And also, just for the meme quality, I guess, back in the old days, this old TTK, people weren't just complaining about the Type 2A all the time. The Type 2A gets so many complaints right now. It is not quite as overpowered as people think, but still, it is too strong. Back in these times, people complained about the Thompson quite a lot, and I feel like that was better balanced than the Type 2A right now. But let's move on to the bad aspects of the old TTK, because there definitely were some. We need to eradicate this thought process of just everything being great in the olden times. Like, I think Battlefield 1, for example, is really fun now, but it has a lot of problems still, as I used to complain about when I played it, and I make that known. Whereas I see a lot of people just saying, BF1 is so great, and they're some of the same people that were saying it was trash back in the day, so we have to be realistic. And in the case of the old TTK of Battlefield 5, it was definitely more punishing for new players. Now, you could see see this as a good thing because of the skill gap, and that's absolutely the case, I feel, but we mustn't ignore that for some people, it was very, very difficult not really knowing how to play the game. DICE don't really give you tutorials and tell you anything about the game, particularly I feel. And so coming in as a Battlefield noob, you're gonna get wrecked. One, because of the time to kill and the weapon mechanics and everything, and two, because the game is just so complex, which does turn people away from the game to a certain degree, I would imagine. So it's not that I don't want the old TTK to come back or have something similar to it, a tweaked, superior version, but maybe DICE could implement more things into the game to teach people how to deal with stuff. That would be great. And maybe like a boot camp mode or something would be good as well, to keep some lower level players together until they reach level 10 or something like that. Back on the old TTK, bolt actions were outclassed, more so than they were when they changed the TTK, and even though that's been tweaked since, and so they are back to not being on a level playing field again, at least it's a bit better than before. Moving forwards, they'll probably get worse, although velocities are going to change in that, and we'll go into that later on. But yeah, bolt action rifles requiring a headshot to get a kill on a full health enemy, especially on console, but also to a lesser degree on PC, makes them just not as good for 99% of players as using, let's call them, regular guns. And if you want a full explanation of that, you can find my recent video, which is titled something like Battlefield 5 has a sniper problem or something like that, so that you don't get the wrong idea. I go into it in depth if you want to watch that video and see what I'm really saying. Because it's very possible to do well with snipers, of course, let's not get it twisted. Moving on, back in the day, there was an MMG meta problem. Everyone was complaining about MMGs, they were way too potent, they were too easy to use, they encouraged a playstyle that played into the poor visibility. It was a real problem. Now MMGs are potentially just not good enough, but back then MMGs were just insane, and yeah, it wasn't good for the game. Because there still wasn't that much recoil, remember, and actually MMGs were easier to use. They had less recoil then I think they do now, or something like that. Netcode at certain points was really bad back in the day. It's not good now, as I just made a video about lag, I think yesterday. But yeah, netcode was abysmal at one point during the old time to kill, and it played into when a lot of people, especially early on in the game, thought the KE7 was overpowered because of the super bullet thing and everything. It wasn't really overpowered, but just lag and netcode was awful. So let's not forget that all these aspects did exist on the older time to kill. You gotta keep them in mind when you're talking about this stuff. And now let's move on to the likely effects of returning to something approaching the old TTK, although we obviously don't know the values right now or if they're completely finalized. Although I have heard some of them, which I can't go into, but it's a mixed bag. I'm gonna say it's a mixed bag. There's good and there's bad, unless they alter things before it all comes out. But hopefully there will be much better weapon balance. A lot of this video is focused upon how poor the weapon balance is, how the top guns are just way better than everything else, and how it's basically caused by things being way too easy to use, a lack of range damage, and other mechanics coming into play like the snap lock-on aim assist with a controller. Now that's not going to go away, the auto-rotation, but everything else is subject to change, and so hopefully that opens up more choices. Let's make some of these guns great again. Give them a purpose. Make it worth using some of them. And just a general need to control recoil more so is going to increase the skill gap in the game again. It's going to raise the skill floor and the skill ceiling, and take away this thing of almost all players being able to beam everyone else almost all the time. Hopefully this time when things are changed, we won't have the MMG issue. I think they're aware that that's a problem. I don't know how they're going to make them decent again, because right now they're pretty poor. They just don't have much of a purpose. But as long as they don't go back to being super overpowered, annoying, toxic weapons, then I guess overall it's a net gain. But it would be nice if they provide a real reason to use them again. Also, visibility is better now, so we won't have as many problems with that passive mentality. And that's not to say that defensive play is bad, like don't exaggerate. But we talked earlier about how a lot of things coming together created a very passive meta. Well, visibility changes now will mitigate that to a certain extent, so we shouldn't get quite as many problems as we had back on the old TTK. But bolt action rifles will probably take a slide back down again, but we'll have faster velocities to mitigate it somewhat. I don't think they're ever going to be balanced in the game with you needing headshots for kills with them, but hopefully DICE do a decent job of giving them a solid place, even if it's not a level playing field. Keep in mind there's a risk that it may not knock down your favorite gun. That's always possible. Some guns will go down and some guns will come up when the TTK changes. Snap lock on with the faster TTK with a controller, and some people say with a mouse, but I don't know, is going to be a thing. I think that will be a problem. Faster times kill is faster deaths. This is especially bad if there's lag right now, which it seems like there is. There's netcode problems. Combined with locking onto the targets, I think that's going to be problematic. So look out for that. There's always potential for other balancing issues. I'm hoping for the best, but I always have this outlook now of needing dice to prove they can nail something rather than assuming that they will. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. But with that, that's my roundup. And I've talked for ages. This is going to be so much editing of audio for me. But now you can make your own decisions and let me know. What do you think of the original time to kill, the changes to the time to kill, and what do you hope for with the coming time to kill, weapon balance, and all that kind of stuff? Let me know. If you want my personal opinion, I much preferred the old, faster TTK, but that doesn't mean I'm not concerned for what is to come, as I've said. And not every aspect of the older time to kill was fantastic, I just think it was better overall. What they are set to bring out, I hope, melds the good aspects of the old time to kill and the current time to kill, and everything that goes with it. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leaving a like means a huge amount to me, thank you so much. Make sure you subscribe if you're new here, I've got so much content coming out at the minute, and I promise there's a lot more to come. All the links to my social media as well can be found in my pinned comment and the description, including Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, here is the Board of Awesome for the epic people who already support me on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and, of course, often. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and my pinned comment. And with that all said, I am GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters. Keeping in mind how many bullets it takes to kill with those weapons at certain ranges, and finding that people just didn't die and I would die at around that time when I'd expect them to go down. Now, I haven't been paying attention to my old footage throughout the past year or so to check this kind of stuff, but I feel like I've been noticing it a bit more recently.